Imagine just one single day, 24 hours, where you see the leader of the world's fourth largest economy resign. A major war sees, well, a huge escalation in airstrikes. And an ancient institution crowns a totally new kind of saint. That was September 7th, 2025. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're doing just that, a deep dive into this really extraordinary cascade of events that all unfolded on just that one day. We've pulled from, well, a whole stack of sources, Reuters, AP, major networks, specialized reports, to really try and pull out the most important bits of knowledge and insight for you. Our mission really is to cut through the noise, connect some dots between events that might seem, totally unrelated, and explore what it all means for our, well, increasingly interconnected world.
Yeah, and what immediately jumps out when you look at the sources together is how these individual stories, they reveal these really complex forces shaping all our lives. Many have immediate impacts, sure, but what's maybe more fascinating are their sort of longer-term ripple effects that are just so easy to miss when you only see one headline at a time.
You're absolutely right. September 7th was, it was a snapshot, wasn't it?
Sure.
Turbulent, but yeah, fascinating. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with some of the biggest global shifts, because the day kicked off with a political tremor in Japan. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, a real veteran lawmaker, he made this pretty unexpected move, resigning from the LDP, the Liberal Democratic Party.
Right, and Ishiba's time in office, it was meant to bring stability, wasn't it, after all those years of really short premierships?
Exactly. But he was kind of beset by really intense infighting within his own party, the LDP, and this growing public frustration over rising living costs, which is tricky timing as Japan was trying to carefully, move away from decades of negative interest rates.
And his resignation immediately kicked off an LDP leadership race. People like Sanai Takaichi were already getting attention.
So what's the bigger picture here? What does it really tell us?
Well, the key takeaway isn't just, a political shuffle. It's a really good look at the tightrope Japan is walking. Ishiba quitting isn't just about internal LDP politics. It kind of pulls back the curtain on this deeper struggle. They're trying to handle this major economic shift away from super loose monetary policy, while the public is demanding relief from, well, those rising costs.
And the markets reacted instantly.
Oh, immediately. The yen weakened quite a bit. That's not just uncertainty. It's the market betting on whether the next leader can actually deliver a stable path forward. And that has huge implications for global bond yields because Japan holds massive amounts of foreign assets. The stakes are incredibly high for the world's fourth largest economy.
Wow, yeah. That's a lot riding on the next leader. How they'll juggle domestic economics and Japan's role with China and North Korea tensions. Okay, shifting gears now, but staying global, a really stark reminder of ongoing conflict. September 7th also saw Russia launch its biggest air attack on Ukraine in months.
Yeah, this wasn't just sort of another attack. It was massive, concentrated. Reports mentioned over 800 drones and 13 missiles fired across the country.
Hitting what kinds of targets?
It hit 33 locations, apparently, including Ukraine's cabinet building in Kyiv, but also, crucially, energy infrastructure and port facilities. Ukrainian officials reported a devastating toll, 5 civilians killed, 44 injured.
Just awful.
Yeah.
What's the strategy behind such a large-scale attack?
Well, the strategic aim seems pretty clear. Russia is trying to degrade Ukraine's energy grid, their logistics, hoping to sap morale, disrupt the economy, and really complicate Kyiv's defense planning, especially, with colder weather approaching when grid resilience becomes absolutely vital. It just underscores the brutal reality of the conflict.
And Kyiv immediately asked for more help.
Yes, renewed calls for more Western air defense systems came straight away.
Okay, so from direct conflict to the economic side effects, OPEC Plus also made a move that day. They agreed to a modest increase in oil production.
That's right. They plan to raise quotas by 180,000 barrels per day, starting in October. Now, that sounds small, especially after years of coordinated cuts, but it does signal that the alliance thinks global demand is holding up, at least into the end of the year.
So not a huge jump, but significant.
It's a careful balancing act, really. They're threading this needle between the money needs of the oil-producing countries and worries about consumers getting tired of inflation in big economies. So it's like a cautiously bullish signal on the global economy, suggesting they have some confidence in demand. But yeah, definitely not a game changer for prices. What it also does is it lets OPEC Plus keep their leverage, their options open as we head into winter, gives them room to react.
Right. Okay, let's bring the focus over to the United States now. President Trump made some pretty major announcements on September 7th. First, on the diplomatic front, he declared a Gaza ceasefire and hostage deal could be, quote, very soon. He said he'd given a last warning to Hamas and that Israel had agreed to his terms.
Yeah, that followed some new U.S. messaging and more intense Israeli operations there.
And the reaction.
Pretty mixed, as you'd expect. Supporters saw it as, clear proof of diplomatic leverage working. Skeptics, though, they pointed to the history in the region, how optimistic timelines have often just unraveled. And crucially, humanitarian groups kept stressing the need for sustained aid corridors, regardless of any potential short-term truce. It just shows the pressure and how fragile peace efforts are there.
Okay, then simultaneously on the domestic front, a different kind of announcement. President Trump laid out plans for expanded immigration raids in Chicago and other sanctuary cities. He talked about deploying National Guard troops and 300 ICE agents to what he called problem areas.
Right, and that immediately sparked a really fierce national debate about immigration enforcement. We saw reports of community leaders postponing events, protests starting up, local officials condemning it, even preparing lawsuits.
So really hitting a nerve.
Absolutely. It raises all these questions about federal intervention in cities led by Democrats, about the civil liberties of immigrant communities. It just highlights those really deep, ongoing divisions in the country over this issue.
And then there was this other kind of battle, a more silent one, playing out. Security researchers reported a wave of malicious emails targeting hundreds of American officials.
Yes, just before bilateral trade talks with China were scheduled, these were described as lure emails designed to get people to click on booby-trapped links and steal their login credentials.
The timing seems significant.
It really does. Looking at the broader context, the timing strongly suggests, an effort to get some advance insight into Washington's negotiating positions before those critical talks. It just reinforces all those constant warnings we hear about state-backed hackers and, frankly, the need for much better phishing awareness and multi-factor authentication across government agencies. That's something Congress and inspectors general keep flagging as a major security weakness.
Okay, shifting again, this time to judicial matters. Israel's Supreme Court made a pretty significant ruling that day, too. They ordered the state to improve the quantity and quality of meals for Palestinian prisoners, mandating 3 meals a day.
Which was quite an unusual judicial check on government policy, especially during active hostilities.
And the reaction inside Israel.
Predictably sharp and divided, hardline ministers apparently denounced the ruling, while civil liberties groups praised it as, vital for basic human rights. It really brings up that difficult question. How do nations balance security needs with human rights during wartime? And it definitely complicates the internal politics in Jerusalem. It also feeds into that bigger conversation about protecting independent institutions like the courts. Similar, actually, to an economic debate happening in the U.S. that same day.
You mean the Federal Reserve independence issue?
Exactly. Kevin Hassett, who used to chair the Council of Economic Advisors, he publicly urged President Trump not to interfere with the Federal Reserve's independence. Hassett argued against undermining those institutional norms, saying Fed independence has been, a cornerstone of U.S. monetary policy, but it's clearly under a lot of political pressure.
So even conservative economists were raising concerns.
That's how markets and policy analysts read it. It was seen as a strong signal that even economists usually aligned with the administration saw real risks in, let's say, heavy-handed executive actions, especially anything that might politicize monetary policy. It's all part of that much larger debate about preserving the independence of key institutions in, a very charged political climate.
Okay, let's circle back to international relations for a moment, specifically with a key U.S. ally. There was an immigration suite at a Hyundai LG facility in Georgia.
Yes, that led to the detention or departure of hundreds of South Korean nationals. The reports mention around 300 people. South Korea immediately sought assurances for its lawful technical staff, while U.S. officials talked about visa and labor compliance issues. It quickly became both a diplomatic and an economic flashpoint.
What were the wider worries there?
Well, beyond the immediate human impact, analysts warned about potential delays for these big, high-profile electric vehicle projects, and also significant friction that could really complicate Washington's supply chain partnership with Seoul, which is critical. It just highlights how complex cross-border workforces and subcontracting are in global manufacturing, Legal issues can rapidly become diplomatic headaches impacting huge investments.
Absolutely. Okay, let's turn now to the power of nature and the undeniable impact of climate change. Hurricane Kiko was threatening Hawaii.
That's right. It had weakened from a Category 4 down to a 3 or maybe even a tropical storm by then, but it still posed a threat. dangerous surf, rip currents, high winds, heavy rain.
And the state prepared.
Yes, acting Governor Sylvia Luke declared a statewide emergency, mobilized the Hawaii National Guard. It really underscores Hawaii's long history of being vulnerable to Pacific hurricanes. But it also points to the bigger global challenge of forecasting these increasingly unpredictable weather patterns in a warming world. The key insight, I think, is how even storms that are weakening can still cause significant local flooding and coastal erosion. It demands constant preparedness.
And we saw other humanitarian crises amplified that day too, didn't we? In Afghanistan.
Yeah, after that devastating earthquake that killed over 1,400 people, survivors were refusing to go back into unsafe homes because of aftershocks and just slow reconstruction. You had families camping outside, facing really grim shelter and health crises.
So you can connect that to Pakistan too, right?
Absolutely. In Pakistan, you had unusually severe monsoon rains that displaced millions, leaving survivors with basically nothing. What you see looking deeper is this persistent vulnerability across the whole region. Weak building standards, limited government capacity, ongoing instability, it all just magnifies the human cost of these disasters. And climate experts are increasingly linking these intense events to global warming. It also highlights that constant donor's dilemma. How do you provide effective aid in really difficult political situations?
Okay, let's shift to global societal trends.
Sure.
Protests seem to be a major theme on September 7th. In Nepal, there were deadly Gen Z protests.
Yes, really serious unrest, primarily led by young activists. Reports indicated at least 14 people killed, many more injured. It seemed to be triggered by a government shutdown of social media, layered on top of rising anger about governance, corruption, and just lack of economic opportunity.
What's the takeaway there?
Well, it highlights this growing friction, doesn't it, between digitally savvy activists who use social media to organize and governments trying to clamp down on that online dissent. Rights groups immediately raised alarms, and economists warned the turmoil could scare off tourism and investment, which is critical for Nepal's recovery after the pandemic. It's like a small picture of a global trend.
And not the only place seeing unrest. Indonesia, too.
Right, a similar dynamic but different triggers. Mass demonstrations turned violent in Indonesia over controversial housing allowances for lawmakers, but also deep frustration with stagnant wages. Police and military were deployed after deadly clashes. Rioters attacked government buildings. 5 deaths were reported, and President Prabowo Subianto even canceled a foreign trip because of it.
That sounds like it drew international attention.
It did. Significant global attention and criticism, especially over the crackdown. TikTok apparently suspended live streaming in the country. It really underscores the fragility of Indonesia's democracy and its economy when faced with that kind of widespread public anger, especially when money worries ignite broader political unrest.
And speaking of controlling information, India expanded its social media censorship powers.
Yes, the government brought in new legal powers, allowing even district-level officials to demand platforms take down content. And apparently, the new law was enforced quickly, with several controversial posts ordered removed almost immediately.
What are the concerns there?
Significant concerns about eroding democratic norms, obviously. Civil society groups voiced serious alarm. It just fuels that whole ongoing global debate about balancing national security versus free speech, and it puts more pressure on tech companies about where they stand on global standards for internet rules.
Okay, let's switch gears completely for a bit. Culture, sport, and maybe the unexpected. In tennis, Carlos Alcaraz won the U.S. Open.
He did, yeah. Beat Jannik Sinner, won his second U.S. Open title, and got back the world #1 ranking.
And there was an unusual element to the final.
Right. President Trump attended the final, which led to much tighter security. Unfortunately, reports said it left a lot of fans stuck in really long lines trying to get in.
So what's the significance beyond the tennis result?
Well, the result itself pretty much cements this two-man rivalry at the very top of men's tennis, kind of a new era. But the other insight from that day is how these huge sporting events become cultural moments, right? And sometimes they intersect with politics, sparking debate about how you handle security when heads of state show up at big public gatherings.
And then a really unique story from the Catholic Church. The canonization of Carlos Acutis.
Yes, the first official millennial saint, a 15-year-old known for being tech-savvy.
Why him specifically?
He was venerated for creating a website that cataloged Eucharistic miracles. So he kind of linked traditional faith with modern digital life.
That seems like a significant move for the church.
It is. Looking broader, church leaders are really promoting his sainthood as a way to bridge generations, to encourage young people to engage with spirituality in our very digital world. It marks both a religious and arguably a cultural turning point. showing the church embracing technology to spread its message.
And turning our eyes upwards, there was a moment of global unity, a total lunar eclipse.
Yeah, visible across the Americas and Europe for many under clear skies. Lots of photographers, enthusiasts, people watching online streams, seeing the moon turn that coppery red color.
What's the deeper meaning there, if any?
Well, the interesting thing is how astronomical events like these really do become global shared moments. They reliably get huge public participation, spark interest in science. They provide this rare unifying headline, a shared sense of wonder on a day that was otherwise filled with pretty turbulent news. A reminder of things bigger than us.
And finally, a story that always grabs attention. The Powerball jackpot.
Yes, the $1.8 billion jackpot, the second largest ever at the time. It was split between two tickets, one in Texas, one in Missouri.
Each winner potentially getting a massive payout.
Exactly. A lump sum around $410 million each. What's often overlooked, though, is how these huge jackpots become these nationwide spectacles. They draw millions of people into this shared kind of fleeting excitement, especially amid economic uncertainty. But of course, they also always raise those concerns about the broader social impact of gambling.
Okay, wow. We have really taken a deep dive through an extraordinary day, September 7th, 2025. We've seen leaders fall, conflicts flare up, economies shift, and yeah, even a celestial event briefly unite us. It's genuinely amazing how much can happen in just 24 hours.
It really is. And if you connect all those threads, try to see the bigger picture, what really stands out is just how profoundly interconnected our world is. A political decision in Tokyo ripples through global markets, a cyber attack targets diplomats right before talks, local protests in one country get global attention, distant natural disasters need international response. It just hammers home that what happens over there nearly always has a direct, tangible impact over here.
Exactly. And it really makes you think, doesn't it? How many of these stories from just one day will become the long-term headlines? How will they shape our future in ways we maybe can't even imagine right now? We hope this deep dive has, well, given you a bit of a shortcut to being informed, maybe sparked your own curiosity to dig into some of these stories a bit more. So as you think back over this whirlwind of a day we've just discussed, here's something to ponder. What single story from September 7th do you think will ultimately have the longest lasting impact?